welcome to the Volunteer Development Series podcast. I'm your host, Pat Delizio, the General Manager of Diamond Valley Basketball, and today we are talking about recruiting and retaining coaches at domestic level. To do this, we are joined by Basketball Victoria Coach Development Officer, former head coach for Vic Metro, under-18s, under-16s, Diamond Valley Junior head coach, more importantly, former Green Hills domestic club coach, and the host of the Talking Split podcast, the Basketball Victoria podfather himself, Rob Coulter. Thank you so much for joining us.
The nicest intro I've ever got from anyone.
You usually do the intros.
No, I do. That's why it's always bad.
How good's our studio?
Yeah, it's a better setup in the gauge room. Like, there's climate control here for a start.
Oh, really?
It's, yeah. Like, I came out of yesterday's podcast just roasting, unfortunately. Like, it was cooking. So I'll take this any day of the week.
No, it's great. So obviously, if you listen to episode 1, you'll notice the audio quality is much better because we are in the Banyul Nillumbik Tech Schools podcast studio, which is across the road from our stadium. So shout out to them and shout out to Kim Mitchell, my nephew's coach from St. Helena, for recommending this room to us. Much appreciated, and hopefully it sounds great and we get a lot out of today. Really appreciate you taking the time, Rob.
No problems at all. Easy.
So want to cover obviously a few things today. This podcast is for our volunteers out there to help them, a little bit of a resource for them as well. And really we're just trying to give clubs and the coaches out there some idea of, you know, what we can do to support them and what the clubs can do. So why don't we kick off there? I know it's been a while since you coached domestic, but what are your experiences like with clubs and coaches?
Look, it has. And to be fair, I haven't forgotten what it's like. Like, I know what people go through. I talk to coaches every day just in my role in general, just about what they need and how difficult it is. And we're acutely aware as well that there is such a high percentage of coaches out there coaching domestic basketball that are parents. And that's probably the thing that I think gets forgotten a lot, is that you're almost voluntold. It's,
Okay,
you know, you sign your child up to play basketball and sort of people look at you like, hey, do you know what you're doing? And if you're over 6 foot tall, they just jump on you straight away. It's like, you must have played basketball as a junior. And they try and just drag you in that way. But it really is a lot of people giving up their time for the good of the kids. And I think that's really what we have to focus in on, is that it's not about the coach. And that's probably the biggest thing to take away from it early doors is you put your hand up, and it's a great thing to put your hand up, but don't think that automatically makes the wins and losses more important for you in your life. Your job is to still get the kids better, make sure they're having fun, those types of things. So it's been a while, and like I said, I think for a while there I was coaching at 4 different domestic clubs on a Saturday in between reffing games and those types of things. This is just what I did because I enjoyed it. I wasn't good as a player, so I kind of had to try and stay in the sport somehow, and that was the thing. Like, I enjoyed coaching different age groups, different genders, different clubs with different philosophies on things. I was lucky that a lot of people helped me along the way get involved in it. And it's like, I was at Green Hills, I was at Diamond Creek for a while, I was at Watsonia Heights Warriors for a little while. I think I did some Apollo stuff, St Thomas stuff. Like, sort of not many clubs left at Diamond Valley. I didn't coach domestically, as it turns out.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. How did the different clubs, like, what was a great experience for you and what helped you the most? Obviously, that's really cool that you had some different experience, different clubs, and they operate all differently in different sizes. So what worked well?
Yeah, I was a sucker. Like, it's I had problems saying no to people that would sort of come and say, hey, look, we really need a coach. And I was kind of one of the outliers, I suppose, in that I didn't have a vested interest. I didn't have kids playing, so I was kind of like the nice neutral person that could come in that had some rep coaching experience as well. Like, I probably coached rep before I was ready to coach rep stuff. Like, I jumped in fairly early into that, where I had my first season of rep, I think, came 2 seasons into coaching domestic stuff. So it was fairly early on.
Yeah,
all things considered.
1 year essentially.
Yeah, no, like I said, I was an idiot. And, just kept putting my hand up for stuff. But it was that kind of thing where I enjoyed it. Like, I genuinely liked getting coaching reps and coaching different types of things and people. You network and talk to other people throughout the stadium. Like, if you go down to Diamond Valley Basketball Stadium on a Saturday, like, there's people there from literally 8 till 8, it feels like at times, and it doesn't take much to walk past and have a chat with someone, or someone from somewhere else and they introduce you to someone else again, and all of a sudden it sort of spirals out. And because I was reffing at the same time, I was down there a lot. So it made life a little bit easier, I suppose, in that way, that I could probably tackle the coaching side of things with a coaching hat on, but also a reffing hat on at the same time. And I do recommend to anyone out there that has any interest in it, take a course for both.
Yeah.
Like do a coaching course, do a refereeing course, understand it from both sides. Pick whichever suits you. Do both if you can. Like I'm a big advocate for our junior players going through accredited coaching courses, but also doing a refereeing course, and just find out if you like it. And if you do, great, stick with it and try and progress. And if you don't, that's fine. Like find what works for you in that space.
Gives you that different perspective as well.
Yeah, I think it does. And it's amazing how many times you can talk players off the edge. That you can sort of see are starting to get a little bit worked up, and I can't get a call. And it's like, well, there's a reason you're not getting a call because you shouldn't be. Like the ref is right. Yeah. Like this is why you're not getting that block charge call for that exact reason. You can actually come to them with some just a little bit more knowledge. And, it was a little bit of a light bulb moment, I suppose, for me when I started reffing and coaching at the same time. It's like, oh, actually, this is, I get it from both sides now.
Absolutely. There's always stuff changing as well.
Yeah, constantly. Like I still don't understand the travel rule. Like I'm not across that at all. Like cross court, I've only just started to get my head around now that they've changed that. But yeah, it's those types of things where I think you're around it more often. So you consequently you pick things up. You see other people do things differently. You hear the coach down the other end. Like even when you're the ref, you walk past and you hear the coach say something to you, and it's like, oh, it's a really good way of phrasing that, or that hits the ear wrong. In that space too. So you learn a little bit about, how to manage people, and that's ultimately what coaching ends up being. It really doesn't matter what you run tactically in that space. If you can't manage people and you can't manage personalities or communicate with people, then ultimately as a coach, you're going to be up against it.
Well, let's focus in on that while we're on it. New coaches coming in, because as we said, it might just be a parent putting your hand up. Don't know a lot about the game, might have played before, so you're like, there's some familiarity there with, what to do at trainings and stuff like that. What are some things that is just a pass mark for them first year? Like, because I think new coaches can overcomplicate things. So what do you see is just, what's the basics to get right for new domestic coaches?
I think all coaches are guilty of overcomplicating it. Like it's a lot of people will come in with a little bit of an idea of here's what I want to do and this is how I want it to run and this is what it's supposed to look like, when in reality it's just going to be messy regardless. I think that the domestic side in particular, where you probably don't have the same level of commitment as you would for say a representative team in that space, like you're going to have 10 kids for most of your training sessions, those types of things, whereas domestic is almost seen as a little bit of I'll get there, like it's a priority but it's not the priority in that space. So for mine, the pass mark for domestic is how many of your kids come back at the end of the season. Like the wins and losses, look, they're nice. Like we understand it. It can be a really nice Band-Aid for a lot of other things that are maybe bubbling away on the side. But honestly, if your kids aren't enjoying it and they're not coming into sessions with smiles on their faces because they want to be there and they're not leaving the same way, that's when you've got to really reevaluate what you're doing in that space. And the easy way to do that is just to ask your players. Like, what do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? How would you do this differently? Those types of things. And if you don't understand your players or you don't have that relationship with your players, you'll never find out. They actually have a lot of answers, our kids. And they're very rarely shy of an opinion. They've always got something they want to throw out there to you, but you got to ask them and you got to find out, look, why are you here? My experience with, and it's a little bit of a different tack, but my experience with coaching an under-18 girls team last season at the rep level, we had probably 2 or 3 players that had a genuine interest in getting better and progressing. For the other 7, it was social. Yep. And that frustrated me, to be fair, because I had a different understanding as to what I wanted to do with them. But for mine, I could continue to bash my head against the wall where I want something different to them, but all they're going to do is get frustrated and say, hey, this is not enjoyable for me to turn up for anymore. And they vote with their feet.
Yeah, sure.
So if all of a sudden you start seeing your numbers drop off at practice or games and those types of things, it might be time for a little bit of a check-in with your players. And it's like, hey, is everything okay? Is training on at the wrong time, which means you can't get there? Is there anything you want to be doing at practice that we're not doing at practice? Those types of things. And I think back to my, I want to say loosely playing career, which wasn't much of a career, but it was one of those things where I was really content playing in teams where I just got to play. I didn't worry about the tactical side of things or anything like that. And it was only when I started moving up teams where it became more tactical. It's like, actually, I don't really enjoy this. This is not fun for me anymore. You go to training and you run through your offense 5-on-0 and it's like, this is not fun, straight away. Whereas I can guarantee you, 14-year-old Rob, if you just rolled the balls out at practice and said, hey, we're going to scrimmage for an hour, I'd be there for it. No problems at all. So I'm not saying roll the balls out at practice. Please don't quote me on that. But it is that kind of thing where what do the players want to do? And some of them really want to improve. Some of them are there because it is a social thing. Some of them are there because they don't know any better. They've always been basketballers and they just continue to be basketballers. There are others there that their parents kind of make them do something in terms of physical activity, which we all understand as well. But find out. And if you know what you're dealing with in that space, where you can start to tailor a little bit of what you want your training sessions and what you want your season to look like. You might come in with a C grade team and they're like, hey, we want to try and get through grading and get into B grade. Like, all right, cool. Like, if that's what you want to do, like, we can try and aim towards that. But if that's not what they want, why would you put them in that position?
Absolutely. How do you manage the balance of that, though? So if you've got genuinely 4 kids who want to develop and, might be playing rep outside of the domestic team, and then you've got 3 kids that are just there for fun, how do you manage the balance of how you do your training sessions and how you sort of communicate with the team?
Yeah, I'm all about gameplay at training. Like, the less static drills. Like, it's actually a guy that used to coach at Diamond Valley who was a coach developer for Port Adelaide Football Club. Rob Mason was talking about it, and he sort of equated it to the junk food drills, like the 3-player weaves, the horseshoe shooting, and those types of things. And it's like, yeah, they make you feel good because they're running, but there's no nutritional value, so that doesn't really get the players better. They don't really enjoy it. They're just going through the motions in what they're doing in that space, and it kind of resonated with me a little bit. So consequently, I do a lot of disadvantage stuff at training sessions. So 2-on-1, 3-on-2, 4-on-3, that sort of stuff, where the offense should score in that space because they have the numerical advantage, but the defense has to hustle a little bit and try and find ways to not allow that to happen. But it involves decision making. So the more we can empower our players to decide what they want their experience to be, the more buy-in we get from them. So if you are dealing with, say, half a team that is all about improving and getting better, that's fine. They still get to scratch that itch. But the players that are there just for fun, well, that is fun for them. Like, that type of content is fun for them. So now they can go and get what they want out of it as well. And I think how you deal with it is more about the feedback you give. You might hold some of your kids that are trying to progress a little bit more accountable, and there's a little bit of a shorter leash on the errors and the feedback that you give to them.
Yeah.
Whereas the kids that are for fun, I'm not saying don't coach them or don't give them any feedback, but you may just have a different goalpost.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's okay too.
Yeah. So you just monitor your communication with the different kids that want different things.
It's all communication. Like, it's every coaching course we go to, and I deliver a lot of coaching courses for schools as part of like the Year 12 and stuff. And like, it's one of the things, like, what does a good coach need to be successful on every course I've ever taken? Like, the first one that comes back is communication. It's like, yeah, but you guys all sit on your phones all day. You don't communicate to anyone face to face anymore. Like, the hypocrisy in that almost is kind of laughable, but it's what it needs to be too. Like, they have to find
here, everyone.
It's that kind of thing. Like, it's if you can't communicate with your players and you can't understand where they're coming from, you've kind of lost the battle before you started. Like, with the 18 girls last year, like, every now and again I'd have to drop like a TikTok reference or a Be Real or something like that so that they'd understand that I get what they're going through. And when there was that massive disconnect, that's when we actually had the most problems.
Did you understand the words
you were saying,
though?
Not at all. I asked them at the start of the season, like, hey, how do we all want to communicate here when I need to send a message out? Like, what do you want it to be? Do you want it to be WhatsApp or iMessage? And they're like, oh, Snapchat. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, in no way, shape or form will it be that. But that's kind of the world they live in. So I have to understand their world before I can really get them to do what I need them to do on the basketball court.
Yeah, amazing. So that's probably some training stuff and some stuff to monitor throughout the year. I think the big one, and I touched on it with Soph last week as well, but going to go into a little bit more detail. Game day. Rock up, as you said. You come to Diamond Valley on a Saturday if you're playing here, and it's chaos, and it might be your first week, and you've got kids probably rocking up, maybe some 20 minutes before, some 3 minutes before the game. What do you think are some keys to get players ready, or to just what could coaches do on game day, filtering into the game too, timeouts, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we probably overestimate our own importance a little bit as coaches, and we try, and it comes from a great place, don't get me wrong. It comes from a place of we want to try and give all our players as much information and all the answers as possible so that when they get on that court, they can actually perform. The reality is our players remember about 30% of what we tell them. And that is drastically low and somewhat frustrating to even think about. But if you've got 5 kids in front of you and you're about to give them the instructions to walk on the court, they're remembering 30% of it. And it's probably not the same 30% for every kid.
Sure.
So you might sit there and say, we're in match up full court defensively. Our offense is going to be pass and cut, and we're going to send number 40 to their left hand. every kid will remember one of those things, and it won't be the same thing. So you'll have half your team in matchup, half your team in zone, half your team sending number 40 to their right hand, and all of a sudden you're down 10-0 in 2 seconds because that kid's gone off, those types of things. So it really is the keep it simple stuff. Like, just remind them, okay, match up defensively, here's what we're in an offense, out you go. Like, don't overload them with rules and regulations, because that's not fun for them. But there are some kids that absolutely want to be challenged to a point where they try and progress and they try and get better, no problem. That might be a chat off to the side with that player. It's like, hey, whilst we're in matchup defensively, I want to make sure that you're not allowing middle. So when you're close out, carry a high hand on that, send it down towards the corner. Here's how you're going to guard that play. You can give them more information if they're capable of taking on more information. But the average 12-year-old, they're not up for that. That's just going to be too much. So it's small, short instructions. Do you need to have all your players in a huddle 10 minutes before the game starts and talk to them for that whole 10 minutes? Like, how much do you really think they're going to remember? 0.
Yeah.
So it's that type of thing. So I'm really big on the minute before the game starts, we'll have a quick chat. Here's the starting 5. Here's our rules. Catcher. Like, out you go. Go do what you need to do from there, and we'll make the adjustments where we have to make the adjustments from that point. But not overburden them. Like, let them have that social time with their friends before the game. Like, that's a big part of what they do and why they do it. They want to see their friends that some they'll go to school with, which is cool for them. Some they won't see all week except for a basketball. So let them have that time where they can interact socially and do what they want to do, and then you can start to move it on from there.
And same goes for timeouts as well during the game. Keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let them come in, grab a drink, grab a breather. Like, if you start talking to the kids as they're walking off the court, they have heard none of what you said. Like, they need that drink bottle, that sort of safe place where they can then go and sit, and then you can talk to them. And I mean, the big thing I think for coaches there too is try and get to their eye level. It's don't talk down at your players. So if you're standing up and they're sitting down, that can be really intimidating for a lot of players in that space. Try and get to their eye level. And I know everyone's knees and hips for a number of years, it may be a little bit harder for some than others. But if you can get to that level where they're able to sort of look at that point, it actually makes a lot of things go a lot easier. And then your timeouts, it doesn't have to be motivational. Like, it's listening to a rep coach the other day that went down the, do it for each other and all this sort of stuff. It's like, that's probably not really for them. Like, they don't resonate with that. They need instruction. They don't need the motivational pep talk and, let's run up these steps and see the Rocky statue and that sort of stuff. That's probably not really going to get it done.
Yeah. And I guess kind of stick to what you know as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, if it's instruction, then it's that simplistic nature of it, but also don't go outside of, it's okay not to go outside of what you don't know. Well,
and take the emotion out of it. Yeah. It's a lot of the times we'll have a timeout because something's gone wrong. So we'll call it and we'll be maybe a little heated or a little bit frustrated by the time they come back in, and, we can almost take it out on the players a little bit. And it's like, well, actually, just take a breath. Like, they haven't made that mistake on purpose. So in that type of a situation, rather than, I don't want to say go the player straight away, but rather than sort of trying to spout off instruction to them, let them take a beat and ask them a question. Like, okay, why did that happen? And let them come back with the answer. And there might be a very valid reason behind it. It's like, well, look, I wanted to go right, but it was taken away, so I had to go left. It's like, well, okay, that's a pretty good answer. Yeah. You find out if the players are self-aware or if you're having to push all the information on them. And the idea is, I think as coaches, we almost want to be a little bit redundant in that space. We don't want to have to give them all the answers, because in the heat of battle, games going on, 4 courts running side by side with each other, refs on every court, parents on every court, kids on every court. By the time you see something, process it, yell it out to the kid that's on the other side of the court. That kid stops what they're doing, hears it, processes it. The situation's changed. Yeah. So we're not in a position, like, we don't want to be the video game coaches where we just sort of sit there and we move kids around with a control. That doesn't work. We can't be that. That's, if only it was that easy. Like, NBA Jam was easy back in the day. There were 2 buttons. You can't screw that up. There's like buttons, paddles, and all that sort of stuff. But that's what it's like dealing with our kids now. Yeah. They have so much more going on than back in the days where there was a joystick and 2 buttons. Like, they were wired differently 20 years ago to how they are now. And it's amazing how many coaches that used to play have now come into coaching, and you see the same drills that they went through as a player being rolled out. And there's value in them. I'm not saying get rid of them altogether, but there's more out there. And that's the big thing for coaches is go and find out what else is out there. Come down to a rep training session and see what's going on. Like, engage the Raquels, the Sophs, the Matts that you have access to at Diamond Valley that can come and help you at your training sessions and get more content that's relevant to your age group. Coaching is one of those things where people do share by nature. I don't think anyone keeps stuff secret. There's no magical trick play that'll get you 2 points. Like, everyone knows everything to a degree. Yeah. So go and ask questions. Go and find out what someone else does. Stick around for 10 minutes after your training session on the random Tuesday night and see what the next coach does as their warm up and say, hey, I don't mind that. Ask the question, what's that drill? How would you do it? Would it work for my age group? Those types of things. Coaches share. And
yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say no.
No, it doesn't happen.
Right?
Like, and if they say no, well, you probably don't want it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's that kind of thing. That's not a relationship you need with your coaching. So for mine, just live on the edge a little bit and do some stuff that every now and again you sort of sit there and go, yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we'll have a crack at it, and then adjust from there. And that's the kind of the sweet spot we talk about with coaches is like drill content time-wise at a training session. You're in that 8 to 10 minute mark, give or take.
Is that less as they get younger, or is that sort of say it like if you're talking about an under 8s team?
Yep.
I guess it depends what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like herding cats under 8s anyway.
Yes,
like that's the big thing is trying to get them all to stand on one line at the same time. Like that may take you 8 to 10 minutes in all honesty.
Correct,
so it's those types of things too where your older kids, you can be a little bit more efficient with it.
Yeah.
But I think with the younger kids, you go down that path. If you're looking at sort of that 8 to 10 minutes, your first 3 minutes is how you set up the drill and then just let them do it.
Yeah.
Don't overburden them with teaching points and those types of things. Just let them go and do it. And just from there, that's not coffee time for the coach. That's time where you get to sit there and evaluate what they're doing and say, well, okay, they're actually pretty good at passing on the run. So we don't need to address that. They're not bad at catching on the move as well, but geez, their footwork's pretty average when they have to go and make a finish.
Yep.
So I don't need to touch on those first 2 points, but I do need to touch on that last point. And that's where you get to intervene. You get that sort of 2 to 3 minutes where it's like, okay, we're great at this, but here are the teaching points we need to focus on when we go back into the drill. That last 3 minutes, then you get to evaluate where they're at with it. And has it really made a difference, the coaching? And in some cases it will, in some cases it won't. In some cases, you've made it worse. But that's okay. Like the amount of times, and I'm sure everyone in this room can attest to it, you've been doing some work with a kid on their shot. You try and make a couple of changes. Hey, focus on this. Yeah. And they don't just miss. Like they are like 3 foot short. And they sort of look at you like, hey, what the heck? Yeah. And it's like, okay, stick with me. Stick with me. Like this is not a quick process, but it's that kind of thing. Like trying to just build them through it. But it's kind of the art of coaching is when to intervene and when to let it go.
Because that's the major impact, is that like you can have the major positive impacts and you can see over a period, and it's countless the amount of times I've heard from where we were at the start of the season, they've improved so much. So it can be sometimes you can get impatient, I think, as a coach, and you want to see that rapid improvement and you want to see like the results like show that immediately, but it can take full season, especially with really young kids, right? Yeah,
and there's external pressures to that too. Like we have these beautiful scoreboards that we need at the end of every course that unfortunately almost dictate if we've done a good job or not. But by the same token, probably the false prophet, so to speak, that it's not that. Yeah. Like that, it really isn't that. That's not what it's about in that space. We have parents that have expectations about, well, we want our kids to win and progress and those types of things. And it's like, well, is winning the most important thing, or is falling in love with a sport to the point where they want to go and develop and keep coming back the most important thing? Well, I'd probably suggest the second. Like the winning stuff, I played in good teams as a junior. I could not tell you which ones we won and which ones we lost, looking back at it now, but I can tell you which coaches cared. Like I know which coach, like I still remember them. Like the coaches that actually put time into trying to get me better, they're the ones I remember now. So it is one of those areas where I think we can get really caught up on the win-loss stuff, and I'm certainly not going down the hippie mentality of take away all ladders and scoreboards or anything like that, because there is a part of it where you have to learn how to win and lose too. So there is a value in that, but it shouldn't be the guiding light that we go off.
And something I think that's probably a little bit, maybe a little bit freeing to new coaches, or release the pressure a little bit, is how much impact do coaches actually have on the changes, or the, in inverted commas, changes that they're making during a game?
Yeah, minimal. Yeah. Like, I can speak to this from a rep level. I felt like I had less than 2% of control of what went on the court on a Friday night. Yeah. Like, if they turned up and they wanted to be there, we were humming. Like, life was good. If we turned up and they just sort of, look, take it or leave it this week, that's just what you get. And you can't motivate players all the time. If you are continually having to sort of dive into the kit bag and find something else to motivate them and those types of things, you're just going to be drained at the end of it. It doesn't actually help. And at some point, the players have to be self-motivated as well. There are repercussions. It's their journey to go on. It's their pathway. It's not ours as the coach. Like, we have our own things that we want to do as coaches, and that's quite okay. But the random win and loss on a Saturday, that's not going to really make or break you as a coach. If anything, it's going to give you a different bit of insight as to, like, hey, did this work tactically? If it didn't, what could I have changed? And the standard answer, and we see it a lot as well, the most two common change-ups that we see in particular on defense would be if our match-up defense isn't working, we're going to play zone. And
which you mostly can't do in domestic.
Which you can't do in domestic. Or we're just going to press the pants off you with like a 2-2-1 or a 1-2-1-1 arrow press, and we're just going to be bigger and stronger physically, and that's going to move the needle. And it's like, well, yeah, that's fine, but that also doesn't work at higher levels and in older age groups. Like if you're going to watch senior men's league on a Wednesday night at Diamond Valley, well, yeah, you're going to see a lot of zone, but we don't want our junior kids playing that way. Like that's for people that can't move anymore. So that's not for the kids that have nothing but energy in that space. So let them go and get that energy out and trial and error.
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with senior men's league over 35s, Rob.
I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying if there was a no zone policy, your numbers would
top 5 3-point makes in the league last year. You can have a look at that, but that's fine.
No. I don't do stats.
So let's talk about from a club point of view. So obviously our clubs, we've got 21 clubs at Diamond Valley now. Yarrambat have got 80 plus teams. And they're all voluntary run. They do an amazing job. What are some key things that they can do to help their current coaches and make sure they stay around from an administration point of view? Yeah,
I think where a lot of places go wrong is that they beg, borrow, pray that coaches will turn up at the start of every season, because it is, and I don't say this purely because this is the space that I work in. I am a big believer in that if you get the coaching right, a lot of other things go right within your association. Because better coaches don't complain to referees as much. Better coaches understand fixturing problems and they just work around it. Like, they don't complain about it. Better coaches get their kids to turn up to practice more often. Better coaches understand the implications of a win and a loss. Better coaches understand when to sort of back off a little bit or how to challenge their players. So for mine, if you get the coaching right, everything else works well. But you can't be a great coach in 6 minutes either.
Sure.
So it is one of those things where you need coaches season on season. And if there's no support for coaches, that's one of the easiest times to just wander away and to say, hey, this is not for me. Like, this doesn't work anymore. I don't feel like, or I feel like I'm doing this by myself. And so if you can be in a position where you can have an assistant coach, that obviously makes a massive difference, because you can share a little bit of the responsibility of, if we are in the space where it's parent coaches, you might have had to coach your child for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And you need a break. But if you don't do it, who does? And you're in that really weird space. It's like, well, if I can get someone else to at least coach them, then I can coach the other kids within the team. And that might be the trade-off between the two coaches. So there's that support network that I think has to exist. And I think there are a lot of clubs that do a lot for their coaches. I think the one area we haven't really got our heads around yet, and it's something we're conscious of at Basketball Victoria that we're looking to get into probably over the next 12 to 18 months, is that coach developer space.
Yeah.
Like someone that is not necessarily coaching a team, someone that is not necessarily an Australian or a state team coach, someone that is not necessarily tied into your rep program, but just understands how to teach, how to manage, how to deal with the little things, just a sounding board even. It's just, look, I'm having this problem. Is there any solution you can think of? And they go, try one of these 3 things. One of them might work. All of them might fail. Either way. But just knowing that there is someone there that has their back at the end of it, because, and I think we've all been through it. We can walk out of Diamond Valley on a Saturday after a 35-point loss. The parents are like, hey, are we really doing this? Like, is this what our Saturday looks like now? The kids are a little bit traumatized because they've lost by 35, and you as a coach are going, geez, I'm the problem.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's nobody's fault. Sometimes the grading map just throws out, wherever it is, you've got to cross over against someone somewhere, and it just happens. Like, it doesn't tend to stay that way for an entire season. But we go very internal, I find, as coaches in that space, and we worry that we're the problem, when in reality, a quick chat with someone can sort of solve that problem. But we're all in that position as well, where how do you find good coach developers? Do you have an age group head coach that looks after all the under 12s, or someone that looks after the 12 boys and someone else that looks after the 12 girls, or what do you do in that space? That's the difficult part, and that's where we want to try and get a little bit more support for coaches. I think just having someone, whether it be like a coach's night you do at your club, say once every 2 months. Like, I know Bellarine Basketball do a great job with their rep coaches on, I think they do one Sunday a month, where they bring everyone in, they put pizza on, they talk something clinic-wise, and then they just have it's almost like group therapy afterwards as to what's been going right, what's been going wrong. Has anyone got any solutions to this? And it's kind of that thing. Yeah. I think that's a good way to do it. And I mean, they started off with sort of 2 or 3 coaches turning up to it, and it spiraled very quickly to actually their whole program turns up. And I know that was a big part of my coach development. Was on a Friday night after a game, we'd go and grab pizza with 3 or 4 other coaches. We'd dissect what went right, what went wrong. And out of that, you sort of feel like, oh, maybe I don't feel so bad, or these problems aren't unique to me. Someone else is having these issues as well, and there's a little bit of comfort in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think time is the biggest thing, like for everyone. So when you talk about giving that support to coaches from a club administration point of view, it's who do they call?
Yep.
And then it's usually someone on the committee who's already doing 3 different things and already taking their kid or multiple kids to games and doing all that stuff and selling and reffing and everything like that too. So it's as you said, like finding that person who maybe doesn't have all those commitments as well, but can dedicate themselves just to have their phone on a Saturday and get those phone calls.
Well, and even parents of kids that have gone through previously.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's so much knowledge. I was talking to a parent not long ago whose child actually both their kids started under 12s, and the boy and girl, both 2 years apart. They went all the way through a representative program. And for the first 2 weeks after the youngest child aged out, they're like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, I have not missed this at all. This is great. I've got my life back and all that sort of stuff. Then about week 3 or week 4, they're like, yeah, I really miss it. Yeah. Like, I really miss being involved with a club, caring about what's going on, those types of things. And it's like, well, you coach domestic for a lot of years with your kids involved. How about you get back involved? And you don't have to have the same level of commitment. Like if you've got a work function or if you just want to go, watch something else on a Friday night, no problems. But how about you stay involved? Like rather than just aging out and losing those people, they've got potentially 8 to 12 years worth of experience in the sport that we could tap into.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those types of people are really valuable. So I would encourage, don't let people work out there's a life outside basketball. Like keep them involved as long as you possibly can, and keep them around it. And again, the level of commitment can change.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Yep. Like I think if it's clearly communicated, that level of commitment, that's an easier sell than going, hey, can you be our director of coaching? It's like, well, no, can you just be support? And
that's the thing. Like I again said yes to being Greenhill's director of coaching way back when I was like 19, 20 years old, I think it was, and didn't realise just how many hours that would take up. Yeah. And I think I lasted about 2 weeks before I was like, guys, no, like I can't commit to this all the way through.
Yeah. With that as well, we talk about the commitment side of things and spreading that across. Is it really important just to actually be specific in what you're after when you're trying to find these people?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the kind of the hard part. I feel like we're all looking for that gold nugget of this is going to be the perfect coach. And it's like, well, they're not going to be ready-made and sitting on the shelf. Like if they're a ready-made coach, they're probably already coaching for someone else.
Yeah, sure.
Or somewhere else they've got experience. It's getting good people is the big thing. Like you can mold good people into what you need them to be, and that is just engaging, entertaining, fun, those types of things. Like if you're that as a coach, what more do you really need? Like you need to have some knowledge of the sport for sure, but that can be gained fairly quickly. I feel like there's enough resources out there for people to tap into where they can find drills or whatever the case may be. But for mine, I'd stop looking for the perfect fit, and rather than trying to grab a perfect fit from another club or another association, just build it from within your association, because they're the ones that actually have value. They're invested in it because they're already there. You're not asking them to drive further or commit to something else. There are plenty of people out there that would like to help and feel like they could do a good job, but we maybe don't engage with them early enough. Like there was a guy I was talking to not too long ago whose child did athletics, and he worked for an SSO, so a state sporting organisation, and had a pretty good understanding of all things coaching, and his wife worked in sponsorship and marketing. But the athletics club never found out anything about who the parents were. Yeah. So there's 2 fantastic resources that absolutely could have helped that athletics club that they've missed out on.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not going to just put your hand up and say, yeah, I'd love to do this. Like, those people don't exist. Like everyone needs to be asked. Yeah, and if you ask them and you find out who you're dealing with, that can go a long way towards it.
New coaches. Yep. The last thing we'll probably touch on. How do you find them? Like, I mean, we always talk about parents, and it's usually who wants to coach, and it's the person who doesn't step back from the line is usually the one that's there. And I think a lot of it's got to do with what we spoke about. If you've sort of got that structure there in place to help them, they're more likely to step forward. Is there anything else apart from that we can give some hope to where we can find these new coaches?
Tap into your older players is the big thing. Like that's the sort of 15 to 18-year-old that's still playing, that has an interest in the sport. If you can find a way to get them coaching, or whether it be assisting someone else, or maybe they co-coach a team with a friend of theirs, because then you've got that social network that kind of breeds accountability, I suppose.
Yeah, okay.
Is a really good way to get more kids involved in it, because I think there aren't too many people that want to coach their kids. Like, I think they do it, but I don't think that's their preference. I think they would rather have someone else. Yeah. Understandable. Like, I completely get that, but we also understand that it's not always achievable too. So if we can get our younger coaches coming through and getting some reps early, that is a massive life skill straight away that they can start to learn about planning, a little bit of resilience in there. Like, communication is the big thing. Like, I sort of joke about it before, like 16-year-olds send you a text message when they can't come to practice, whereas like in my era, like we had to call. Yeah. Like and you're sort of hoping that the coach wouldn't answer as you're about to bail on training, and it's like, oh, voicemail, how good's this? But our kids now, they lack that communication skill, where it's like, well, okay, you have to give and take direction. Like, you have to be able to tell that 9-year-old why they have to go and stand over there on the wing and not gravitate towards the ball. And yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? Yeah, like, think about this when you go and play, and it will genuinely make them flip it. It makes them better players. Like, having to go through it because they see the game a little bit differently as to what they're looking at. So I'd really do a lot of work tapping into that sort of 16, 17, 18, even a little bit older age groups, and whether that be they start at domestic, whether it be they come and help at holiday camps, whether it be the junior development type programs that are on all the time. There's plenty of paid opportunities out there for some of these coaches as well to get involved. And that, for me, is a really good way of, one, giving back to your community, which is what everyone wants to be involved in the first place, but two, just developing skills. And these are kids that are eventually going to want to be employed somewhere. Yep. They really want to flesh out a resume early on, and it's like, well, actually, I've contributed to my community. I can communicate, I can give direction, I can take direction. I'm used to dealing with conflict. I'm used to planning out a season, those types of things. That's a really good trait to have for a lot of young kids.
Absolutely. And we've got, obviously, you touched on before, Sophie and Raquel as our community development officers that are ready and on hand to give those new coaches workshops and help them come to trainings and visits.
To be honest, that's not something that every association has.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Diamond Valley are lucky in that space that they do have two people that are dedicated to that genuinely care.
Yep.
And that's the big thing, is that I think if you want people that don't care, you may as well just jump on YouTube and find what you want to find from there. Whereas the actual ability to have a physical conversation with someone can go a long way towards it. And I know a lot of the courses we run, there is an online training component. But, I mean, online training is hit and miss for some people. Some really enjoy it and the accessibility towards it, whereas some, it's just not for them. Yeah, and I know I do that every now and again. If I have to re-accredit for something, it's usually like click until I can't click anymore, and then I'll read the last thing that I have to read. But for mine, it's actually the practical sessions that give the most amount of traction, because you get to turn up and ask the question that you really need to know the answer to, and you get a genuine answer back. For mine, that coaching network is just invaluable.
Yeah, awesome. Rob, thank you so much, mate. I'm going to ask you, I got a question that I'm going to ask everyone at the end of every pod. And I stole it from another podcast as well, so I'm not taking credit for it. But
I take credit for everything.
Sorry. I actually stole from yours. No, I didn't. What's your earliest sporting memory, an event that you attended?
Yep. I'm thinking back. It was, I can't remember exactly the year, but I remember it was an NBL All-Star game at the Glass House. Yeah, like it was like an East and West, and it was someone that I went to primary school with's birthday party. So that was like the deal is that you got to take like 5 or 6 mates along to watch an NBL All-Star game. Yeah. And that was the first one I remember going to. Like, I do remember going to an AFL game with Dad, but I don't talk about AFL. Like, it's kind of like the dirty word. It's but yeah, that's the first basketball one for sure.
And favourite sporting food? What do you get stuck into when you go to an event?
Actually, nothing. Yeah,
okay.
I didn't want to eat.
Bring a sandwich from home?
No. I'm certainly not that organised. Like, I'm usually a post-event person. Like a pre or a post. Like, I don't tend to eat at actual events, but yeah, before or after, definitely up for that.
All right, cool. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. Do you want to plug Talking Split?
Yeah, listen. Talking Split podcast. No, I'd say that facetiously. It's you can listen to the Talking Split podcast on Apple and Spotify platforms. The links are always on the Basketball Victoria website, and you can follow along on the @Talking Split socials on Instagram and Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. It changes as it turns out. But in all honesty, if there is anything you need help with, obviously reach out to Diamond Valley Basketball, and they can certainly point you in the right direction. And if you need more, you're more than welcome to hit me up at Basketball Victoria as well.
Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Matt Stewart for producing today's pod. Thumbs up from over there. Thank you, mate. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you follow on Spotify so you can get the updates every week, and see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.